You're watching Africa News, bringing you the top stories on the continent this hour. Stepping down after 10 months in power, the Central African Republic's rebel-turned-president Michel Djotodia resigns alongside his Prime Minister. Gaining crucial ground, South Sudan's military says it's retaken the rebel-held town of Bentiu, regaining control of a key oil-producing region. And he's not dead, he's alive and well. Rwanda's presidency dismisses rumours that the country's longtime leader Paul Kagame is dead, following celebrations at the news in DR Congo. Hello there and welcome. Firstly, Michel Djotodia, the rebel-turned-president of the Central African Republic, stepped down this Friday alongside his Prime Minister Nicolas Tiangaye. Now, his resignation came during a regional summit in the Chadian capital, N'Djamena, aimed at stopping deadly sectarian violence that's engulfing the country. Djotodia was thrust to power as the nation's first Muslim leader during a coup by Seleka rebels last March, which led to widespread religious tensions.
This week, Idriss Déby clearly showed the influence he wields in the Central African Republic. Thursday, he said the authorities there had failed, and he sent a plane to bring the country's parliamentarians to N'Djamena. Friday, in a rare move, the President Michel Djotodia and the Prime Minister Nicolas Tiangaye resigned in the capital of a foreign country.
It would have been necessary and beneficial if this resignation had happened in the Central African Republic. Now, this will weaken the new authorities in Bangui. They will be labelled as having been nominated in very peculiar circumstances.
Chad's clout is not a new phenomenon. Déby had already helped François Bozizé take power in 2003. And Djotodia last year before changing his mind in recent days. Another influential actor in the country is France, the former colonial power. It has deployed 1,600 soldiers there. The relationship between Chad and France has greatly improved ever since both countries fought together against jihadists in Mali last year. Djotodia, who resigned this Friday, has probably not forgotten this statement by François Hollande last month.
We can't leave in power a president who couldn't do anything, or worse, let things happen.
But some analysts believe France and Chad aren't the only kingmakers in Bangui. They say other neighbouring countries play a major role, especially Denis Sassou Nguesso's Congo-Brazzaville.
Well, the Central African Republic's National Transitional Council now has 15 days to choose another interim president to replace Michel Djotodia. That council is led by ALEXANDRE Ferdinand Gendé. France 24 spoke to Mr. Gendé, who will be the de facto leader of the country for the next 2 weeks.
I am now the interim president until the election of a new head of state. Within 15 days, Congolese President Denis Sassou Nguesso will supervise the election of our new president. Some colleagues are asking me to be a candidate, but no decision has been taken yet. I have to go back to Bangui first. In the current context, the ideal candidate would be someone who can satisfy the former Seleka rebels, the anti-Balaka militias, and members of the former regular army. There will be a secret ballot. The process hasn't officially begun yet, but already 6 people have told us that they want to be candidates.
Following Djotodia's resignation this Friday, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has called for the African Union to swiftly provide promised troops to halt the worsening crisis in Central African Republic. 28 European Union nations have also given preliminary approval for the rapid deployment of hundreds of troops to help African and French peacekeepers already on the ground. Well, earlier I spoke to our correspondent James Andre, who's in Bangui.
The mood was certainly not that happy in the Muslim districts of Bangui. For example, Kilometre 5, we were at the hotel when the news actually arrived, and we spoke to some of the government officials, the previous government now indeed, government officials who were telling us that they were extremely frustrated and very unhappy, and they were also telling us that they blamed this on France and Western powers. So indeed, everybody isn't that happy, but it does seem that the mood has changed during the afternoon. we did hear some heavy fire in the city this afternoon, including mortar shells. Just a few minutes ago, we heard some guns firing just behind me. So indeed, it is still a very volatile situation, but we did see one of the ministers just a few minutes ago, and she was telling us that indeed negotiations were ongoing, and it does appear that everybody seems a lot calmer tonight. Another interesting fact is that the Seleka officials seem very, very eager to show us the Seleka armed forces in garrison where they have been placed by the peacekeepers.
I mean, James, you've touched a bit on the military there. We're hearing the international community talking about deploying yet more troops to support the African and French troops on the ground. What's the military situation as you see it?
Well, basically, we saw every one of the peacekeeping forces leaving base and putting tanks and armoured vehicles all over the city, many helicopters in the sky in an effort to clearly try and stem any potential bloodshed here in Bangui. But on the other hand, we also heard some gunfire, as I was telling you a minute ago. And indeed, we know that there are parts of the city that are held by anti-Balaka Christian militias. We also know that if the Seleka forces are in garrison, the official ones, well, there are a lot of ex-Seleka rebels that have gone home and have taken weapons with them, and potentially there could be a lot of fighting between those two groups, Christian militias versus ex-Selekas.
James Andre reporting from Bangui for us there. Well, we're still talking the Central African Republic here on France 24. This next report takes a look at Djotodia's brief but rather chaotic stint in power.
In January 2013, Michel Djotodia, head of the Seleka rebels, met with his troops on the front line. They had come from the northern provinces of the Central African Republic. Djotodia came equipped with fuel reserves and some advice for his men.
I reminded them that they had the duty and the obligation to respect the rules regarding human rights.
Backed by Chadian and Sudanese fighters, the Muslim-dominated Seleka rebellion gained control of 3/4 of the country. Their military success was followed by a power-sharing agreement signed in the Gabonese capital, Libreville. In March, Djotodia and the Seleka rebels marched into the capital, Bangui, and seized the presidential palace. President François Bozizé fled the country. Djotodia, an unknown until then, managed to unite all the anti-Bozizé factions and gain the backing of regional heads of state. But Bangui soon descended into chaos with looting and violence. Djotodia gained legitimacy, however, when the Transitional National Council elected him president, the first Muslim president of the mainly Christian country. He vowed to put peace between Christians and Muslims and preached unity at a cathedral celebrating Easter Mass.
I am launching an appeal to everyone, to Christians, Muslims, and animists, to love one another and to work for peace in the Central African Republic.
But they were vain words. Djotodia was incapable of controlling his troops and even less of disarming them. The various rebel factions bled the country. Abuses were rife. The Christian community was the main victim. After 8 months of terror, and just before French troops were to be deployed, Christian militias in their turn plunged the country into further chaos and violence. In the aftermath of this bloodbath, Djotodia was removed from power by the very same people who had backed him.
In other news on the continent, South Sudan's military say it's regained a rebel-held northern town this Friday, giving the government control of a region where oil production had been interrupted by deadly violence. An army spokesman said President Salva Kiir's troops have now recaptured Bentiu, the capital of Unity State. Over 3 weeks of ethnic violence between Kiir's forces and those loyal to his ex-deputy Riek Machar has killed at least 1,000 people and forced over 230,000 to flee. Our correspondent Duncan Woodside is in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, for us.
I can confirm that the government forces have indeed taken the town of Bentiu today. They swept into the town this morning and flushed out the remaining rebels, Bentiu having been a key stronghold of the rebels until now. And that's extremely significant because obviously Bentiu is the capital of Unity State, which is one of 2 key oil-producing states in South Sudan. We're also hearing reports from an international charity or a charitable organisation that there has been looting in the town of Bentiu when the government troops came through the town today.
OK, Duncan Moore, I mean, no signs of the unrest stopping. We're at a week of the end, rather, of a week of negotiations in the Ethiopian capital. How are things moving along there?
Well, it seems that the lack of progress on the diplomatic front is obviously feeding into the military situation and vice versa. Unfortunately, there's not a great deal to report on the diplomatic front at the moment. There has been a week of sporadic face-to-face negotiations between representatives of the rebel side and the government side. But I spoke to a member of the rebel delegation earlier on this evening, and he said that there were no direct talks today. And the key stumbling block is still the fact that the government refuses to release political prisoners, and that's a key precondition for the rebels agreeing a ceasefire with the government forces. Until that happens, there's unlikely to be any political progress.
Next, he's not dead, he's alive and well. The message from Rwanda's presidency today as it dismissed rumours that leader Paul Kagame is dead. The denial came amid reports of celebrations in the Democratic Republic of Congo's city of Goma, close to the border with Rwanda. It's unclear what exactly sparked the rumours, but a close aide to Kagame, Yolande Makolo, also refuted them, saying on Twitter they were utter nonsense. Your Africa team is back with more news on Monday. Do join us then.